finding myself at a loss for words.
So one of the things we are talking about when we're talking about our thoughts create our reality is there's always the struggle of, well, how does that really work? How do we know? How do we make it really, how can we become part of that process? And there's really only 3 steps, but I'm going to give you a little more than that. The first step, of course, is desire. What do I want? The second step is it happens. God creates it. It's manifest in the spiritual realm. And the third step is allowing it into your life. But there's a lot of stuff between that second and third step. And I'm going to give you an example and then give you a little acronym that might help you to follow through on that. An example is a motorcycle trip I took with my brother. And we each had, at the time it was before Joanne, so it was a girlfriend on the back. And on the back of his bike as well. And they were super bikes, the first super bikes, 750 Hondas. And we were riding back from Alabama to Chicago at the time. And we came to northern Alabama just before southern Tennessee in the Appalachian area. And there was a pretty good-sized mountain we had to go up, and the road changed from paved to gravel. And it was all switchback. And on a motorcycle filled with gear and people, switchbacks on gravel aren't really a fun thing, so you got to be real careful. And I'm watching in the rearview mirror as I go around each turn, making sure that Ed makes it around the turn. And on one turn I saw all of a sudden it went right off the side. The motorcycle disappeared off the side in my rearview mirror. And I quickly tried to get my bike balanced and set down and ran back. And just as I got to where they went over, 2 hands come up on the ridge. And they climbed their way back up to the road. And Ed is pretty much okay with a few scrapes and bruises. Janice has a burn from the muffler on her leg, but other than that, they're okay. And we look down, and the motorcycle, this is a 700, 800 pounds of motorcycle, is trapped in the vines, swinging about 8 feet above the forest floor. And after we realized everybody's okay, all of us started laughing at this sight, and we could not stop laughing. And then finally Marge says, "Okay, boys, how are you going to get that out of there now?" And I said, "I have an idea, Ed." I said, "I happen to have a little machete with me." I said, "You get on the bike, and I'll start chopping it away. And it'll drop down, and you can ride it on down." And he looks at me like I'm from Mars. And he says, "Look at all the stuff in front of it." And I said, "I'll chop that away too, don't worry." And he says, "Okay, why don't you get on it? And I'll chop it away." And I said, "Ed, it's your bike, it's your predicament, it's my idea. You get on the bike." And I reminded him of all the times we had ridden together and done hill climbs and bike and motorcycle jumping for years and years and years. And I said, "You were great at that, you were great at that, you can do this." And he says, "I guess I could." And he actually gets on the bike, and I start chopping away the vines. And I chopped a little bit of a area for him to go down too, because it was about a 50-foot run down to the road, and it was pretty steep. And I said, "Remember, stand up on the bike, get a good hold, be ready on the brake, not too much on the front." You know, we went through all that sort of stuff. And he says, "Okay." He says, "I'm ready. Open the gate and let this bronco buck." I finished chopping away the last little bit. It started slipping. All of a sudden, bang, it went down. And he's standing up, and he hit hard and bounced back up, and all of a sudden that bike is sliding, and it's just doing everything except falling. He actually rode it down and made it to the bottom. And we all clapped, and we're back to our freedom ride, So here's what happened in the process of manifesting this. Now, manifestation doesn't always happen so quickly like that. Sometimes manifestation occurs as a result of many years of dominant thinking, and that's what's in our life. But you can create in the moment like that. And I have a little formula that came to me this morning when I was meditating, and it's DIFIB, like kill a lie, DIFIB, right? D-I-F-I-B, DIFIB. D for desire. Where's that come from? Well, the root word is of the sire. It's what God is telling us to do. And the ego is not involved in that if there's a good feeling about it and if there's no harm to anyone else. Obviously, if you feel like, okay, I have to have that new car because the neighbor's got a better one, that's not of the Father. That's jealousy, that's envy, and so on. But when it's from the Father, it's true desire. And the next step, I, is intention. We had the desire to get that motorcycle out of there. We had the intention to make it happen and not have to involve someone else. Fib, feeling, and then intuition, and then belief, and become. So the feeling is what you have to have. You have to feel. You have to actually have that emotion. You have to be part of the idea and the bodily knowing that you can do this, that this can happen. And I convinced Ed with that by telling him about all the times he had done that. And I had him run it through in his imagination. So he had the feeling, he ran it through in his imagination, finally came the belief, and then you become. Die, Fib. You become. You become what you believe you can do. And that's why he was able to ride that down there. And that's how you manifest. You go through a process similar to that, but you have to become the person that is aligned with what you want to manifest, what's already in spiritual escrow for you.
Oh, he has such great stories, doesn't he? That's really...
Thank you. This talk is about rising above the ordinary. And for me, that's what I feel when I come to Unity. That's what I suspect has attracted so many of us to Unity. But it wasn't always that way for me. As a young man, I had a lot of challenges with religion, with the Catholic Church, with you ought to, you should, and so on. And I ended up breaking away from all churches by the time I was in my early 20s. And if people would ask me, what are your beliefs? I would say, well, I love what Jesus teaches. It's love. And I was really into positive thinking. Now, that's a lot of what Unity is all about. Even though I didn't know it at the time, I had two of the foundational aspects that helped me to grow my life into a successful career. Unfortunately, I didn't use it in my personal life as much as I did in my career. Well, that was the way my mind worked at that time. I had love, that worked for me. I had positive thinking, that worked for me. But love alone didn't quite cut the mustard when it came to a marriage. What was missing? And I had to really go deep within to figure out what it was that was missing. And I finally figured out. A lot of that love was what I had been taught to say and do. It was almost like Spock love. Mr. Spock? Yeah, if I love enough, we'll handle the problem. But there was something missing, and it's called wisdom. You need to have some wisdom to go with it. And that comes not from here. That comes from here. I was missing the heart part of it. I didn't have an open heart. I wasn't in a healed heart situation, which is like the lessons that we've been talking about during this season right now is healing the heart. And what it took for me was a divorce to open my heart, to break it open, and to put me into a depression that allowed me to see that opening my heart also opened me to other possibilities. I had had mystical experiences as a young man, out-of-body experiences, dreams that predicted the future, things like that. But I didn't talk to anybody about it because it was mystical, and I was into the sciences. And I was into rational reason, logic. And you're missing the real deep part of you when you don't add intuition, when you don't add that extra capability that just expands your life in ways you can't imagine and takes it from from ordinary to extraordinary. That's what I was missing. And when I went through that depression, I was led to the Unity Church as a result. And what better way to come out of a depression than to find Unity Church and get back to my upbeat thinking and get back to love as the basis, but adding in something that I could talk about now, a mystical aspect of our life that's missing in normal times. Why be normal? That's a little plaque that I used to have. I don't know where it went to, but I loved that. Why be normal? Because that's what life is really all about. It's expressing who you really are. It's not playing it safe. It's not being small. It's opening up to who you really believe that you are deep, deep within, that seed that grows into that unique person that you know that you came here to be. And when I started using my intuition, it changed things dramatically for me. I'll give you an example of a situation, a detour in my life where I didn't use intuition, and one where I did. I had just moved back from Australia to San Francisco with my family, and 6 weeks after arriving there in 1976, I got a call from the company I worked for who had transferred me there because they needed me after 3 years in Australia, they needed me there. And they said, "We need you now in Chicago." And I said, "I've only been here 6 weeks. We love San Francisco. I know Chicago. I lived there 25 years. It's cold. It's crowded. Not that San Francisco wasn't, but we just loved it." And the offer was actually a very nice promotion, and it appealed to what? My ego. It appealed to my ego. They even said, there's a chance that this could lead to managing a company like this one of these days. And we talked about it, and I actually turned it down. I said, "No, I love it here." A week later, I got another call that says, "You know what? If you don't take this, your career could be kind of dead-ended." And now, what was instilled in me was fear. My career could be dead-ended. And I said, "Yeah, you know what? It's a promotion. It's an increase in pay. I could become president of the company. Let's just take this thing." And it wasn't my gut impulse. It wasn't my instinct. It wasn't my intuition. It was ego. It was intellect. It was rational thinking. I mean, I did all these nice side-by-side comparisons of and none of that helped, okay? None of it. I just said, "Okay, let's do it." So I left 50 degrees in San Francisco, arrived in Chicago to minus 20, January. And I thought, this is kind of a bad start. The car wouldn't start the next morning. Nothing about that job worked out well. The person that had convinced me that this was the right path left the company. They brought in another president he and I were not simpatico. He didn't like much about my attitude because I was a sales manager. I wanted the salespeople to be motivated, and I wanted them not to have such excessive goals that they were demotivated, and that's what he wanted. He wanted to put it up here where nobody could make any real cash in sales. And I said, that's not going to work. And I devised a good trick. Instead of setting their commission to pay out at 100% like he wanted, I set it to start paying out at 80% of this ridiculously high quota. And later he came storming into my office and said, that is not going to work. I said, I want them to be inspired. I want them to have passion. I want them to get out there and sell and to know that they can make some money doing that. I said, there's a psychology behind this. He said, psychology? Well, I won't say what he said. But it ended up that this was not my place anymore. And I took a job in Texas, in Austin, Texas. So this looks like a real long, difficult detour, right? Well, in Texas, other things happened. That's where my divorce happened. That's where I found unity. And that's where I met Joey. And guess what? Even though I didn't use wisdom to make that decision, even though it looked like a bad decision, God meant it for good. God meant it for good. And I thought, holy cow, this really is amazing how this works. But next time, I don't want this detour. I want to try and so the next time we came to a decision point, Joanne and I were 17 years and 14 years in Austin at the time, and we both decided we wanted to move somewhere that had mountains and lakes and streams and forests and pristine areas. And that wasn't Chicago, and it wasn't even Austin at that time. Austin was just too hot for us. We were from Chicago, both of us, although we met in Texas. Anyway, this time, I decided not to use the head, but the heart, to open the heart and say, okay, what do I really want? And shortly after we had scouted everything out and decided we wanted to be somewhere out west, either Colorado area or Northwest, a job offer came to take over a rep business in Colorado and have an independent business. And I said, gee, this sounds good. I like the idea. It's exactly what I do best. And I like the mountains, all that. But it really wasn't feeling perfect because we had kind of focused more in on the Northwest. So we did this little prayer of this or something better, and let's just see what comes along. And how long was it after that? It wasn't long. I got a call from the company I worked for in Finland at the time, and they said, the product that you are managing in the US for distribution, we're going to go direct. And we want to hire you as our president for this company we're establishing, and all you have to do is move to northern New Jersey. Northern New Jersey? You can't be serious. And believe me, there was an ego factor that said, yes, this is what I've always wanted to do. But my heart knew better. So what we decided was to just leave that prayer, this or something better, and along came this call from Finland saying, be the president. I said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to wait for something better. Because I just can't picture, neither of us could picture ourselves living in northern New Jersey. And they said, okay, if you're not going to take that, what we'll do is we'll set you up wherever you want to be, but you're going to have to be our operations manager, and we're going to install a head of the company with the title president, but I want you to kind of advise him and keep him straightened out. So it turned out we got to go to our perfect place, the same amount of money, a job I loved, which was managing the operations of the Western Hemisphere for sales mainly, and in a place we loved. And that was 28? Yeah, 25 is what I meant to say. See why I need her? 25 years ago. And we have been in a state of perpetual bliss in this area ever since. I've loved it. There's nothing I don't like about it. There's no place in the world I'd rather be. And that didn't come from here. That came from here. That came from the heart. Sorry, Eric. I'm pointing. You got it. Okay. Okay. That came from the heart. And to me, what the real balancing trick in life is connecting these two. Connecting the knowledge, the intellect, the rational thinking, the reason with intuition, and that combination is the wisdom that guides us to make the decisions that represent our perfect path in life. Now, it also means it would be nice to know what that path is. And so that's where meditation comes in. That's where getting that inspiration comes in. But I have to tell you that just intuition alone, you can develop that, and it can start making that connection. You can develop it just like you do a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger you get, and pretty soon you can lift heavier things, or you can do more things. And think of that as like an etheric muscle around your heart, that intuitive muscle that you have to develop. How do you develop it? Well, the first thing you do, this is always what I say, always. First thing you do is you get in the zone. You get in your centered place. That's always first. Get connected. Know who you are. Get connected with God. Get connected with Spirit. Get connected with universal mind, whatever it is that you want to call that. And when you're connected, that's the time to open up to intuitive input. You will not get good guidance when you're in a stressful situation. You'll not get good guidance when you're in turmoil and you haven't taken time to settle down and ask truly in prayer or in meditation, what do I need to be doing? Where should I be going? Who am I really? That's the time when you're in that zone, when you're in that meditative space. And then when you get guidance, practice. Try it with small things at first if you don't already have developed your intuitive input. If you are more of that logical, rational thinker like I was for so long, try it with smaller things and see how successful it is. It will be successful if you get in the zone first. Then take it on with bigger and bigger and bigger decisions, and pretty soon you'll come to trust that. And when you trust your intuition, life changes. It goes from ordinary to extraordinary, because the mystical side of us is the side that we really are best at. Our brain, sure, you've heard, well, we only use 10%. That's not true. That's a myth. That's an urban myth. We use a lot of our brain. It's busy 100% of the time. Different parts are lit up all the time. We may not achieve our full potential in spite of that. We may achieve only a fraction of our potential because we haven't opened up to the wisdom that comes from using intuition. And so my message to you today is to open up to intuition. Open up to your heart. Do it by getting in the zone first, and then affirming that that is your truest and best guide. And then use a test to see if it's a good guide. Does it feel good? Did the guidance I get feel right? Is there any discord, any disharmony, any imbalance in the feeling, or does it just feel plain good? And if I run that picture, do I see any harm coming to anyone? Or is it all flowing from me as good and connecting me in loving ways? Because ultimately, we're all going to pass this plane. And when we do, there's one question that we all have to answer for ourselves. How much love do I take with me? And how much love do I leave behind? Thank you.
Got that rabbi, wasn't it?
Yeah, so Jane asked me to tell a few stories because I like to tell stories, number one. There's been a lot of fun things that occurred, and I've had a lot of good adventures, but this particular one is more of an adventure in spirit, the first story. I had a rabbi come to visit for commercial reasons. I was working with a company that made scientific instruments, and he came over to look at them and decided to make a purchase. And we went to lunch together, and we began to talk about other things, get to know each other a little bit. And I said, so tell me about your ministry, your rabbiness. And, and he said, well, my ministry is all about food, the right foods to eat. And I said, yeah, okay, what else? He said, no, that's it. It's about what foods. People come to see me, and I tell them what foods are kosher. And I said, oh, okay. And how does that square with what you do in your life? He says, oh, I'm advising Israel on making weapons. So I'm trying to put this all together. And he said, well, tell me about your path. And I said, well, I belong to a church called Unity, and we believe that our thoughts create our reality. Everything that we think is manifest in this world, and if you don't like what you're seeing, change your thoughts. And I said, we take full responsibility for everything in our life. And he said, holy cow, full responsibility? He said, you want me to go back and scare my congregation right out of my church? Or synagogue, I should say. Synagogue, thank you. Yeah, he said, that would freak them out. They want me to tell them, and they want other ministers to tell them what they should be doing and guide them and so on. And it's funny how we give our power away and how that scares us. But this law works regardless of whether you know it works or not. And as you come into harmony with it and begin using it in your life, you'll see the most amazing things happen. And I'll tell you a story about how that guidance, if you're okay with, all right. So how that guidance really affects me in a real-life situation. I do a lot of caving. I used to do a lot of caving, but a little less now. Still, I go see caves, and go into caves. But the first cave I ever went into was Sullivan Cave near St. Louis, Missouri. And we had a guide. The guide was an expert caver. He was a spelunker. He was a member of the National Speleological Society. He was totally trustworthy. So there was 7 of us besides him that went in, and he guided us through this cave for several hours. We went back deeper and deeper and deeper into the cave. And we came to a T in the cave where you could pick different directions. And one of the guys that was with us, his name was Ed, said to Russ, who was the leader, we're already several hours in. We got several hours to go back out. Shouldn't we be thinking about turning around? And there was 6 of us that wanted to continue. So the 2 of them said, we'll wait here at this intersection. Go ahead and get back, and then we'll go out together. Well, we went on, and we went on a little too long, maybe an hour. So as we came back, in about 45 minutes, we found the T with nobody there. Said, whoa, we must have been going faster. And we started down it and realized that we didn't recognize anything. We were in the wrong passage. So we came back out and went to the T, and they still weren't there. And the next one we came to, which we thought, that's got to be the right one. So we split up and went different directions and scouted it out, came back and said, we think it's that way. That didn't look familiar to the 3 that went that way, but that did. And we headed out. And after a couple of hours, passing side passages that we hadn't seen before, and finally we came to a spot where some of the lights were going a little dim, and the group was getting pretty tired, and they wanted to stop and rest. And I wanted to kind of encourage them, but they were not ready to keep moving. So I said, I'll go ahead a little ways and check it out. And I went ahead about 15 minutes, and I realized my light was going out now. I better get back. So I head back, and guess what? I start to hear noises as I'm heading back. I wonder where they're coming from. And I look down, and there's a hole that I hadn't seen. And I heard voices, so I jumped down there, and my group had decided to keep going. They found the passage that was the way out I had missed, and my light was going out. Now that would have been lights out for me in many more ways than one. But it's because I gave my power to someone else, didn't watch the way in, didn't pay attention, and I was allowing someone to be my wisdom, my guide, instead of taking responsibility for myself. And that's what can happen in a life or death situation. It's not all life and death in our lives, but be your own guide. And from now on, any cave I go into, I am laser focused on every turn, every formation, every difference, and I've never been lost since.
That's an amazing story.